Case, there will be a public hearing. We ask that the applicant keep their presentation to under 10 minutes. They may reserve 2 minutes as a rebuttal. We ask that the public keep their comments to 2 minutes unless they have previously requested in writing for 5 minutes as a representative of a group or organization. Pursuant to the provision of section 2.68.030 of the Metropolitan Code of Laws, notice is hereby given that a final hearing before this commission is appealable to the Chancery Court of Davidson County or the Circuit Court of Davidson County, vis a statutory writ of certiorari. You are advised to seek your own independent legal counsel to ensure that your appeal is filed in a timely manner and that all procedural requirements are met. You should also seek independent legal advice regarding the applicability of the writ of certiorari to the specific decision of the Historic Zoning Commission. So number one on our agenda is adoption of the August 16, 2023 minutes. Commissioners, is there a motion?
Move for adoption of the minutes.
Thank you, Commissioner. Is there a second? Second by Commissioner Johnson. All in favor? None opposed? Seeing none, and that motion carries. I'm going to do a little chair courtesy here. So I wasn't here last month, but I do want to commend our commissioners on how they articulate and are engaging in the way they look at decisions and projects. I just wanted to thank you for your generous time to serve our city and Davidson County. All right, so I think, Melissa, we have adoption of the agenda. Are there any changes?
Yes, there are a handful of changes. Item number 5, 1004 Petway, that has been revised for administrative approval. Number 6, 949 Russell Street, the notice requirements were not met, so you'll see that in a future meeting. Number 9, 411 North 15th Street, a request has been made to remove it from the consent agenda, so that will be presented at the end of the agenda, at the end of the hearing. Item number 16 is 3506 Murphy Road. It was revised for administrative approval. Number 19, 3806 Central. There was a request to move the hearing until next month. Item number 21, 1504 Holly Street. They did not meet the notification requirements. Same with item number 23, 405 Broadway, and item number 24, 400 Broadway. They did not meet the notification requirements.
Okay. That is the revised agenda for today. Is there a motion to accept? Commissioner Johnson, second?
Second.
Commissioner Mayhall, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Unopposed? None. That motion carries. Thank you. Are there any council members present today? Okay. We always want to thank them for their representation for our city as well. Right, consent agenda.
All right, as noticed to the public, the items on the consent agenda will be voted on at a single time. No individual public hearing will be held, nor will the commission debate these items unless a member of the audience or the commission requests that the item be removed from the consent agenda. I'll read each case out one by one. If you are in opposition of the project, please raise your hand when that case is called, so that we can make sure that it is removed from the consent agenda. So any item removed from the consent agenda will be presented at the end of the meeting. So the first on the consent agenda are permits issued for the prior month. I believe there were 42 since the last meeting. 1004 Petway was revised for an administrative permit. 949 Russell has been removed as it did not meet the notification requirements. 1419 Holly Street, new construction of an addition. 1700 Fatherland Street, new construction of an addition. 411 North 15th has been removed and will be heard at the end of the meeting. 932 Benton Avenue, new construction of an addition. 1013 Montrose Avenue, an addition and an outbuilding. 2205 18th Avenue South, new construction of an addition and outbuilding. 1504 Dallas Avenue, an addition and an outbuilding. 2500 West End Avenue, demolition, new construction, a new pavilion in addition to an existing building. 3638 Richland Avenue, new construction of an addition with a setback determination. 3506 Murphy was removed. I think it was revised for an administrative permit. And 2217 Lindell Avenue, new construction of an outbuilding. So staff recommends approval of the items on the consent agenda with the applicable conditions in the staff recommendations, finding that these applications meet the design guidelines of their respective overlays.
Thank you, Melissa. Any questions, commissioners? Okay, is there a motion to accept the consent agenda as presented?
Move approval.
Thank you, Commissioner Mosley.
Second.
Commissioner Price is seconded. All in favor? Oh, we'll make the motion for.
Yes, may I make a quick comment? I just want to comment just one item 14, 2500 West End Avenue. That is a new pavilion and addition, and it is on consent, so I don't want to pull out of the consent, but I just want to acknowledge what a great plan it is, and I would like to thank our former staff and Metro Park staff for this great revision, and that's excellent project. And with that, I in favor
to our
of
motion,
voting.
yes. Thank you, Commissioner Johnson. Sorry?
They moved again with comments. If we need to do that all over again, I don't know what to say about that.
Legal says it's okay. So there was a motion to accept the agenda. Was there a second? Okay, Commissioner Price did the second. All in favor of the motion? Okay. Any opposed? Seeing none. Again, thank you. And it is a great project. Thank you very much.
Okay, so the first violation today is at 1406 Fifth Avenue North. This is located within Germantown. So the violation is in regards to the addition that was constructed 6 feet taller than the primary structure instead of the 4 feet that was previously approved by the commission. This was discovered during an inspection of the site. It is worth noting that the applicant has been very communicative during this project and has been requesting all their inspections up until this point. So again, the commission previously approved an addition to the structure. It was approved to go about 4 feet taller than the primary structure, but as constructed, it was going about 6 feet taller. While the guidelines only allow for up to 4 feet within the Germantown overlay, staff finds that 6 feet could be appropriate in this case. This is due to the steep grade of the lot. From front to rear is about a 10-foot difference. It's very, very steep in this area. Also, the property has very minimal setbacks, and the additional height is set far back on the lot, so it's minimally visible from the street, if at all. Also, the addition only increases the footprint of the main house by about 686 square feet once the non-contributing additions were removed. The main house is about 1,800 square feet. Everything else with this project does meet the guidelines. So with that, staff recommends approval to revise the existing permit to allow for the additional height with the condition that all original conditions approved as part of the current permit apply. With this condition, staff finds the proposed height meets Section 5 of the design guidelines for Germantown. So any questions?
Not at the moment. Thank you,
I
Kelly.
believe the applicant is here if you want to speak.
Good afternoon. My name is Elliot Perry. I'm one of the owners of the property. I'm also the general contractor on the project. I do have a prepared statement from Preston Quirk, the architect on the project. So I'm going to read that if that's okay. Kelly Mitchell discovered on 8/25/23 that the existing house is not as tall as shown in the plans. Preston Quirk had a note in his file that the existing house was 17 feet 2 inches from the floor to the roof ridge.
Could you slow down just a tad?
Sorry.
Thank you.
Nervous. I'll start over. Preston Quirk had a note in his file that the existing house was 17 feet 2 inches from the floor level to the roof ridge. He's not sure who provided that dimension, but is pretty sure that it was received before any interior demolition had been done. Now that the structure has been exposed, the ridge is actually 15 feet 6 inches to 15 feet 7 inches above the floor, depending on which end of the house you measure from. It settled quite a bit. The 17.2 did look correct when drawn, and it was not questioned until framing was in place for the new addition. Preston has updated the plans to show what is in place now. The approved plans allowed the 4-foot ridge above the existing home. As constructed, the new ridge is right at 6 feet above the ridge to the original house. Preston has noted that when you stand on the west side of Fifth Avenue against the building that houses Fifth and Taylor, the ridge of the new addition is not visible from eye level. If you do go west up the hill on Taylor Street, about 40 to 45 feet from the corner, you can see approximately 2 feet of the new ridge above the roof of the home. The high point of the new ridge is almost 57 feet from the front of the historic home. We are respectfully requesting that this addition to be approved as currently framed, primarily based on the fact that the addition is not visible from the other side of the street when facing the front of the home. In addition, the homes on each side of 1406 are 2-story homes that screen most of the addition from the view as well. Preston did apologize for not being here. He had a vacation that was planned well in advance that he just couldn't move. The only thing I'd like to add to that is that we took over this project about a year ago after the drawings had been done and permitting was there, and re-permitted the whole project when we took over. We weren't trying to sneak this one in. We were just as surprised as anybody else on this, and we're just trying to push this one forward. The house has been in a state of repair for, I think, about 3 years now. And so we're really just trying to get it done and move forward to completion. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Question for the applicant.
Yes, please.
And, yeah, maybe with the architect not here. I'm familiar with this residence, don't anymore, but having lived in the neighborhood. The measurement from the finished floor, is it measured from the finished floor? Because it's kind of a half basement it's a very unusual home. It's very old. That measurement is taken from the first floor level to the ridge, not necessarily, the dimensions you quoted are not necessarily from grade, but they're from the finished floor.
Yeah, that is
depending
correct.
On where you measure.
I was actually there when Miss Mitchell came by and we stumbled into this, and we were trying to measure every which way we could to figure out where that initial 17-foot came from. We couldn't make sense of it. So the 15.6 that we're currently measuring is from the finished floor grade of the interior of the home to the top of the ridge. And we tried measuring from elevation. The elevation was too extreme.
And so when you include the grade sort of at the street or the front facing, it's considerably more than
I would have to look at my notes, but it's between 4 and 5 additional feet from grade to the top of the home.
And so the measurements in the back, I'm maybe too familiar with this lot, but there's significant grade change there, a lot of rock on this.
There is, yes.
Where that's taken from the finished floor, which maybe at some places is actually below exterior grade.
Yeah, when we got into doing the addition, we actually had to excavate quite a bit. So at the rear of the property, the finished floor level is 6 to 8 feet below grade at the rear of the house. And so if you're standing at grade on the rear of the home, your new ridge line is approximately 10 feet above grade. The house sits pretty low into the house.
So I don't want to put words in your mouth, but there is an issue of perception here and kind of how you measure it. It's always about how you measure, right?
Absolutely.
And so I wanted to be clear in terms of, we have siding embossed, not embossed, some things that seem maybe to some more significant or less significant than this is a violation case. I just wanted to get some of the factual pieces maybe out there, at least your read on having accepted the project and how it was constructed as to how and where those things are measured from. Thank you for clarifying.
Yep.
Commissioners, do you have any other questions to the applicant at the moment? Okay, just hang around for a minute. Thank you. Open public hearing. Okay, close public hearing. Commissioners?
You know, I think I remember touring this house before when there was a demolition permit. Seemed to me there was a lower section behind the house that may have been removed prior to this. So that could explain the discrepancy. But with that said, though, I appreciate Commissioner Mosley's questioning, and I think that that's sound logic, and I think this is a good project, and hope that this structure continues to be a real contributor to this neighborhood. With that, unless there are other commissioner comments, then I move for approval with staff recommendations.
Motion?
I will add a comment before we vote in that because it's a violation, and I think if the facts of another case were presented and this one is fact dependent, and finding that it doesn't contrast greatly with adjacent non-historical and also contributing houses in the neighborhood. I'd just like to add that for the record.
Duly noted. Okay, it is an unusual place. It's my neighborhood as well. I've seen this property for quite a few years, and it's been reiterated in certain projects. So it's good to see it going. That was a motion. Is there a second? Commissioner Cashin, all in favor? Any opposed? Okay, seeing none, that motion passes. Thank you, applicant. Looking forward to seeing that project.
Okay, the second violation today is at 101 Stroud Avenue. This is located in Eastwood. It is in regards to the outbuilding constructed on the site and not any work done to the main house. So there are 4 points of discussion with this case. The first two are the ridge height and the foundation height. As approved, the ridge was supposed to be about 21 feet from finished floor. As constructed, it's about 22.5 feet also from finished floor. The foundation, as shown in the plans, has minimal to no foundation itself. On the highest point grade, as constructed, it's about 7.5 inches at highest point grade. Staff finds that both of these meet the guidelines because it's still under the 25 feet allowed per the guidelines, and the foundation is still under 1 foot per the guidelines as well from highest point grade. The two primary issues with this case are the wall height and the dormers. So as approved, the structure had two dormers. One's a wall dormer, the other one was fully inset from every which way. As constructed, there are two wall dormers. Again, the guidelines are very clear about this. Only one's allowed per outbuilding. So staff recommends that at least one is inset the full 2 feet from the wall below. The other issue is the wall height. As approved, it was measuring about 12 feet from finished floor. This is the maximum allowed under the guidelines. As approved, as constructed, it was measuring about 13.5 feet from finished floor. It exceeds the guidelines and it exceeds what was allowed in the permit. So staff recommends that the wall height is also reduced to meet the guidelines and to meet the permit. So with that, staff recommends approval of the increased ridge height and the foundation for the outbuilding at 101 Stroud, finding that it meets sections 7B2 and 7B3 of the guidelines. Staff also recommends disapproval of one of the wall dormers and of the increased wall height, and recommends they meet what was permitted and what's under the guidelines. So have any questions?
Not at the moment, Kelly.
Is the applicant here? Come on up.
Hello, everyone. My name is Keegan Valente. I'm the owner of Lotus Building Group, and I'm the contractor on this project. So I wrote up a statement here just to make it the easiest to go through. We're not going against anything with the dormer. 100% that is something that we need to adjust. But as general contractors, we rely on the architects and designers to give us plans that can be built off of. We then turn into Metro codes and historical commission for the review and the approval or the disapproval. The homeowner and us were given plans that would not work upon framing the second floor. It was determined that as drawn, approved by the historical commission and Metro Nashville, the approved windows would not be able to be installed with the minimum required clearance from the floor in order to meet the IRC safety code. Due to the designated elevations, this rendered the window pockets unusable due to the rafters and soffits not allowing room for the window trim or even the windows themselves. Due to the added costs and long lead time of window replacements, 14 to 16 weeks. And for safety, the on-site call was made to lift the elevation of the minimum amount required by IRC code for clearance for both function, trim, and final fitment of the windows by slightly lifting the ridge and extending the perimeter walls to maintain the approved rake on the roof rafters. In order to maintain safety of our final product and protect our clients' overhead costs, this was determined to be the best resolution at hand. We are requesting this adjustment to be approved because if we had not made this call, we would not be passing our Metro Codes framing inspection. We had three options. First option was stopping the framing of the second floor, wait to go through this process that we're doing right now, which in turn would have taken 30 to 45 days to have an answer, which would have completely ruined the first floor framing as it would be out in the weather and would have warped, buckled, and we've had to have redone quite a bit, which would have cost the homeowner more money in framing material and labor. Plus, what would our solution have been? We would have had to order new windows, and who is paying for that as these windows were approved by the Historical Commission. Second option, adjust the ridge height and wall heights to meet the IRC code for the approved window package, costing the homeowner nothing extra and not delaying this project. Third option was to order new windows, which would leave 12 to 14 weeks, which would cost the homeowners thousands of dollars and a longer lead time in that. Okay.
Any questions to the applicant? Okay, not at the moment. Okay, thank you. Open public hearing. Close public hearing. Okay, discussion.
Actually, I do have a question for the applicant or point of clarification, if you don't mind answering.
Okay.
So the egress window you referenced
Yes, sir.
is on the south elevation. That's a slider
Yeah. Yes. No. It's a casement.
casement.
Yes, sir.
Swing out casement.
Yes, sir.
And so, as you stated, I think you stated, it's hard to get it clear. With the roof framed, you couldn't egress out of the window, or you couldn't install it? I'm a little confused or I want to be clear on what prevented that from happening that caused the decision of the field to result in why we're here.
Yes, so the approved windows from the windows order that we sent, the second floor as drawn were at what would have been Met codes, which would have been 24 inches, and we did not require tempered windows at that point. The approved order was not tempered windows, and as I said, they're 14 to 16 week lead time. It's a $30,000 window package, and so the reason why is that if framed that way, the windowsill would have been 8 inches off the ground, which would have been a cause of a trip, and it would have been a hazardous solution.
Okay.
So I have a question to the staff. So I am looking at the as approved drawing and as built drawing. Seems like, as approved, the proportion and size of the window and, as built, window is enlarged. So typically, when applicant or, owner or builder change the window size or opening, they're supposed to contact you and get the approval. Or before they purchase, they need to get in touch with you and approve the window. Isn't it that the procedure?
Yeah, so typically with window alterations, we do want to know in advance. For something like an outbuilding, we do have more flexibility. So if changes are made, we do have discretion in the field to approve it as is. With regards to reviewing the actual windows themselves, we typically look at brand and the line of it. We don't always look at the size because the amount of time it will take to do each one. So I believe we have approved the windows in this case. And so I just don't know about looking at the size of it in this particular case.
So may I ask question to the applicant?
Yes, ma'am.
So I'm looking at the drawing as permitted and as built. So seems to me as permitted is 2 windows, smaller size, but as built, for whatever the reason, enlarged. Is there a reason why the window was enlarged as built?
The windows were not enlarged. The only thing that happened was is we had to raise the height of the walls on the side to make sure that the windows that were approved are correct. I'm not sure if that might be an architectural, I don't have those in front of me, so sorry, I can't see that. But we didn't change the size. They're the same size windows what was on the approved window order. Because we placed that window order 16 weeks before we started framing.
Yeah, I'm looking at the north elevation. For example, north elevation, we had 2 windows, but as built has 1 enlarged, 1 opening. And east elevation, it has 2 opening in the first floor and 1 window, but as built has changed the opening of the windows or where the other window will be placed. So I'm just wondering why along the way, why this plan has changed.
I need to see those in front of me real quick. Can I grab my iPad? Sure. Does anybody have a copy that I can see? The only reason I ask is that we didn't change. I mean, it's the exact same from the approved set that we turned in for Metro and Historic, and what the order, nothing has changed in that meantime.
That can be shown on big screen. Melissa.
I'll add in reviewing the drawings here.
But we're talking about these.
It appears that the second floor window, which the applicant has said was a reason to raise the roof ridge, they appear at 5 by 6. The total opening size is 5 feet by 6 feet on the as submitted, and then 5 by 6 on the as built. If in fact that is the case.
I understand what you're saying now. That's on the other side. That was not the one that we were talking about. But from the approved window order that we turned into Historic has that window. Sorry, I didn't realize we were talking about 2 different sides of the wall, or north and south.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the, original plan
100%,
and as built. Seems like a little alteration here and there, not only upstairs window, but north side and east side. So I was wondering, typically when they builder change the plan, consult our staff and then get approval. So maybe that was the discrepancy of the height, wall height, and so forth. I'm trying to understand why is it happening.
No, those windows on the other wall don't affect. Those other windows on their wall are on a staircase, so there's no bedroom, there's no egress, there's nothing affected that would make it an issue, if that makes sense. But the window order that was approved by Pella or by the Historical Commission does have the as-built window.
Just to clarify on staff's typical review of windows, it's very common, you guys see projects or they get staff approval and we then later on, when construction's going, we then, get the materials for the windows. And what staff looks for is we're looking at the material, what is it, aluminum clad, is it wood, is it vinyl? Then we look at things like, do they have simulated divided lights? Do they have any kind of lights? And then we look at things like window mullions and how they're, the trimmed out. We're not really looking at necessarily, particularly on outbuildings, we're fairly flexible on the size and location of windows on outbuildings. When we're reviewing it, what we look for are, we're not looking at the, sizes, changes in sizes for window openings on an outbuilding wouldn't necessarily be a red flag for staff. It would just be like, okay, you decided to do this, but we're looking at the material, configuration, overall design, mullions and buttons.
And I completely understand that, but it would not meet building codes. So no matter what, we would have been told to lift up the height by the metro codes.
I have an unrelated clarifying question for you on, so earlier you agreed that one of the dormers, you're not allowed to have two. One of those is going to come off. Do you know which of those will be?
And it's the one that is on the approved set. There was an issue with just how it was framed. So that just needs to be stepped back 2 feet. I'm pretty sure.
That would be on the kitchen side of the upstairs plan.
Yes, I think so, yes.
And so you don't have a head clearance issue when you reach the top of the stairs?
No.
If you lower the roof, and don't have the dormer, do you have head clearance issue?
Yeah, yes.
Okay.
Oh, we'll have head issues all around. It'll cause a lot of problems.
Sure.
Yeah.
Understood.
I think you listed 3 options that you went through, and unfortunately, I think the third option was probably, even though it would have lengthened your build time, the one that would have caused least overall headache, and which was to order new windows that fit the framing that was approved. Because the window types are not what we're dealing with here. It's the fact that the outbuilding was built taller than was permitted and is not permitted by the guidelines or by the permit that was issued for this particular project. So unfortunately, we see a lot of these projects like this that go off the rails with something that was built counter to what was approved. And in the past, as a commission, we've typically held the line pretty close to what the permit actually allowed to be constructed.
I can understand where the applicant's coming from, how they got to this point. But like Commissioner Price said, we run into this a lot. And that's the reason that on every sheet of the approved drawings, the first note is, here's the phone number to call if you have questions. Structure to be constructed in accordance with attached site plan and elevations. Any deviation from the approved plans could result in changes being reversed to reflect the approved drawings. Any alterations, whether or not approved by other Metro departments, must be communicated to MHCC for a revision of the permit prior to construction or material purchase. There's a reason it shows up in red on every sheet of the drawings. And so I can understand where you're coming from. I think this is a sensitive issue as far as height of the datus and outbuildings with our neighbors, with our neighborhoods. And they are very adamant about the guidelines being adhered to, that they've approved to as a neighborhood. So I think with respect to that, with respect to 104 Scott Avenue, I move for adherence to staff recommendations and approvals.
There's a motion. There's a second by Commissioner Mayhaw. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, that motion passes. Thank you.
The next case is 808 Powers Avenue. The house at 808 Powers Avenue was a circa 1952 1.5 story side gable bungalow located in the Eastwood Neighborhood Conservation Zoning Overlay. Due to extreme deterioration and changes that had been made to the house over time, the Metro Historic Zoning Commission found that the house no longer contributed to the overlay and approved demolition of the house in April of 2023. Today, the applicant proposes new infill on the vacant lot. The historic context surrounding 808 Powers Avenue is composed of modest 1 to 1.5 story houses. The house at 808 Powers Avenue was a 1.5 story house, and none of the contributing houses surrounding the site exceed 1.5 stories. There's some context images on this slide. The top image, you can see 808 Powers. That's the white house over towards the left of the screen there with the 2 dormers. That was the house that was approved for demolition. And then to the right from there are all 1 to 1.5 story contributing houses. And then on the bottom, 808 Powers is in the dead center of the slide there. And you've got non-contributing infill that's 2.5 stories, kind of 2 houses down that you can just barely see off the left-hand side of the screen. That was built prior to the overlay. And so it's not something MHZC reviewed. And then you've got 1.5 story on either side. Both of those are contributing, and then contributing houses on down from there as well. The proposed infill meets the interior side base zoning setbacks, but does not meet the 20-foot base zoning rear setback. The proposed infill is only 13 feet from the rear property line. Staff finds that the infill should meet the 20-foot rear setback. The applicant proposes to keep the existing driveway and curb cut from the street. No new driveways are proposed. The existing driveway provided access to a front-facing basement-level garage on the previous house. The proposed infill does not include a front-facing basement-level garage. Therefore, the current proposal of keeping the existing driveway with the proposed infill configuration results in front yard parking, which does not meet the design guidelines. Staff finds that vehicular access should come from the alley. If the applicant wishes to keep the front driveway and curb cut, the driveway should extend to at least the rear of the building. Staff finds the overall massing, number of stories, height, width, foundation height, and eave height inappropriate given the historic context. The proposed infill has a full 2.5 story form, which exceeds the modest 1 to 1.5 story historic context, with overall heights and widths that exceed those of the historic context. These heights and widths are analyzed in greater detail in the staff report. The proposed infill has a primary mass at the front of the lot and a secondary separate mass at the rear of the lot. The 2 masses are connected with a lower connector piece. The guidelines state that forms which are essentially a house behind a house with a long, narrow connector are not appropriate, as the form does not exist historically. Staff finds that the overall proposal reads like a house behind a house, and therefore finds that the overall form does not meet the design guidelines. On the front of the house, the front porch is a 2-story porch that exceeds the height of porches on nearby contributing houses. Staff finds that the proposed porch is incompatible with the historic context. While the previous house at 808 Powers had a front basement level garage door, and the contributing house next door at 810 Powers has a front basement level garage door, this feature is not seen on any other nearby contributing houses. 808 Powers was not a contributing building, so its basement garage did not contribute to the historic character of the district, and the basement garage at 810 Powers is not an original condition. To be compatible with the overall historic context, staff finds that there should be no front entry of any kind into the basement level on this lot, that the porch should be 1 story in height and align with the front porch heights of the contributing houses on either side, that the front porch stairs should be oriented toward the street, and that the front porch posts should include bases and capitals. While some of the proposed materials meet the design guidelines, additional information is needed on other selections. And staff finds that the proposed siding to grade shown there on that front elevation does not meet the design guidelines. Staff recommends disapproval of the proposed infill for the project at 808 Powers Avenue, finding that the project does not meet the design guidelines. You also had some public comment that was included for you, and the applicant is here as well if you would like questions for him, and I can take questions as well.
Thank you, Joseph.
Thanks.
Applicant?
Good afternoon. Thank you for hearing this case. As Joseph described, we are trying to do something
Please
very
give your name
I'm sorry.
and address. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. My name is Chris Nunn. I'm representing Strickland Architecture, and with me today is David Lengle-Martin, who is the Director of Permanent Supportive Housing with Park Center, which is a nonprofit working here in Nashville.
Thank you.
All right, now I'll launch into it. What we're trying to do with this project is something that we recognize has a lot of parameters on all sides, the historic overlay, but also issues of fair housing that have to do with the members that Park Center serves, and also trying to make the most utility out of a property that Park Center has maintained for 20 years. So we're going to give you a little bit of an overview of what Park Center does. David's going to go through a few slides to describe that, and then I'm going to specifically address the issues identified in the staff report after that.
Thank you, Commissioners. As Chris said, my name is David Langle-Martin. I'm the Director of Permanent Supportive Housing with Park Center. I just wanted to give you a brief overview of our history so you understand a little bit more about who Park Center is. Next slide, please. Do I have a clicker? Thank you. Even better. There we go. So Park Center's mission is to empower people with mental illness and substance use disorders to live and work in their community. As Chris mentioned, we've been operating supportive housing at 808 Powers since 2003. We were fortunate enough to purchase the property from MDHA with a deed restriction that says if we ever decide not to use it for that purpose, then the property would revert back to MDHA. We've been in operation since 1984, so we're about to come up on our 40th anniversary. Since we've been operating this house, we've maintained very positive relationships with our neighbors. In fact, I believe one of the neighbors is here in support of this project, and I have letters from 3 others, which I believe also were sent to you all. Go ahead and skip that slide for brevity. Park Center essentially tries to provide a foundation for people to recover from mental illness. So in addition to the mental health treatment they might receive from a clinic, we do supportive housing, supported employment, psychiatric rehabilitation in a day program, street outreach, et cetera, to try to make sure that people have everything they need to succeed. So there's a list of our programs for you. And just a little bit further information about this project. Like I said, we were fortunate enough to purchase this property. There's a growing need for affordable housing, and in particular, supportive housing for the people that we serve who are typically under 30% AMI and have disabling conditions. We recognize, since there's an exploding property value issue in Nashville, that we need to get creative with our strategy for how to expand our services to more individuals. So the Fair Housing Act has given us the ability to do more with that property, to be able to serve up to 8 people there. And support from THDA funding this project, as well as the Tennessee Department of Mental Health, has made it possible for us to do what we're proposing here. And so the planning and funding for this project was well underway before the overlay was passed. And because that was in place, we have only so many changes that we can make to be able to serve the members that we work with effectively in a way that is actually going to meet their needs appropriately based on the evidence. So with that, I'll hand it back over to Chris. Thank you.
Thank you. So as David said, we're trying to get as much as we can out of this property. And as you can see, we're proposing a structure that staff feels is too large for the context. Our position is that the experience of this building is going to be that which you see at the street front, which we feel like is appropriately scaled to the context of those modest 1 to 1.5 story structures. The fact that the building steps up at the rear is a function of the grade, similar to the project that you just discussed earlier, 1406 Fifth Avenue. The grade does rise about 10 feet from, it actually rises more than that. It rises about 8 feet from the front of the building to the back of the building. And so the grade causes a considerable impediment to being able to utilize this property in the way that Park Center really needs to serve their members. As you can see from the renderings, the experience of that rear mass of the house is definitely minimized from the street, and so we are asking that you consider that as you look at the massing that we're proposing and hopefully deem it acceptable. In terms of materiality, there are a lot of things that need to be figured out from materiality standpoint in terms of the siding, the base, all of that. And I feel like we can work very closely with staff to come to an agreement on appropriate materials for the building itself. I think the question of massing is the biggest question. The basement entry, as Joseph said, there was a garage entry that was also used as living space in the previous structure, and the basement entry allows us to provide ADA accessibility to 2 more units down there, which is why we're proposing to retain that. And in terms of the house behind house context, I know that having worked on a number of existing houses that have rear additions, that house behind house context is really the solution that gets proposed in a lot of cases to add on to the rear. In fact, I have a house that's been approved by staff at 1316 Stratford that has an almost identical massing. So in that respect, I feel like the massing that we're proposing is appropriate both historically and in the context of the projects that you that have been deemed appropriate in some of these overlays. So I did want to point out, as David said, we do have letters of support from both Barry and Tricia Wilkinson, who own and live at 810 Powers, as well as Laura Schween, who owns 806 Powers, which is on the right as you're facing it. Also have letters of support from John Lozier and Cody Wilkins, who both own on McCarn. So we've worked very closely with our neighbors to try to make sure they understand what we're proposing to do and why. And in terms of the setback, that was all confirmed by the surveyor, so we're conforming to the 44.2 foot contextual setback that exists. In terms of the rear setback, if we have to take the rear entry porch off of that in order to conform, we're happy to do that. But in terms of the overall footprint being larger than the historical context, as David said, the goal that Park Center has is to get the maximum utility out of this property that they can. So being able to provide bedroom suites that accommodate these folks, many of which who have come from living in a homeless condition or living on the streets, being able to provide bedroom suites that conform to a trauma-informed design approach really necessitated the footprint that we're proposing. So we're not just trying to max it out. We're not trying to do a developer flip because, as David said, the moment they quit operating this as a charitable function, it goes back to MDHA. So they don't have anything to gain by trying to maximize it other than to create space to house more folks. So with that, we're happy to answer any questions. Thank you all for your time, and we appreciate your consideration.
Thank you.
David, related but unrelated, do you all own a facility on 4th Avenue in Germantown?
We do.
Yeah, that second picture, I walked by that daily, and I thought I recognized it, so
Yeah.
it's well run. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, any more questions to the applicant at the moment? Okay, thank you. Open public hearing? Close public hearing? Discussion?
I heard the applicant, I think really if we could focus our time on massing and how this might be brought into compliance, or how it does or doesn't comply, I think maybe that's kind of what I heard was our top goal here, to give the architect and the applicant guidance on their ability to meet their mission. Certainly it needs to fit within the guidelines. That's our charge, maybe regardless of our empathy with the mission, which is important. And I don't necessarily want to start off. I'd love to hear from other commissioners what their comments are specifically about the architect's comments, and how you have, whether you see it as a house behind a house or it's appropriate based on other things that we've approved.
I actually do have a question for the architect or for the applicant, if you want to come back up. I love the mission. I'm familiar with the Park Center, and this. I think everyone here agrees with that. But we are also bound by the charge that we're here to uphold the neighborhood guidelines. So I had a question. We do, as a commission, often work with applicants to bring a design into, maybe make compromises sometimes to help approve something that might, in another situation or another lot with different conditions, might not work but could work. What I'm getting to is this project has a lot of problems from the design guideline perspective that we have to square. Were there other designs that could still considered that could still meet the same number of members in the building program that were closer to what Joseph may have or other staff may have worked, in initial discussions with them? Or was this the first one that you as an organization wanted and it's the only one that you have considered so far?
So we've considered many designs on this property. We started before we were able to get permission to demolish the structure with concepts to add on to the rear of the property. And in really starting to understand the site and the context, and in talking to contractors, the option to maintain that 26-foot height all the way back as the grade rise and dig into the hillside really started to reveal itself as a cost-prohibitive option. So as we look at ways to bring this design closer to the guidelines or within the guidelines, it really just eliminates the number of people that they can serve. So that, we're sort of working from one end with the size of bedroom suites that have been demonstrated to be successful, and then the buildable envelope that we have. And for example, if we were to take the second story off of the rear mass, then you can serve 3 fewer residents. And so, as David said, from a property value standpoint, it just becomes much harder for them to meet the needs of that population, the fewer we can house there. So we've considered a number of design options and have really tried to tighten it up as much as we can. But there are basic building blocks that we have to work with that have sort of resulted in the mass that you see.
The reason I ask is because if it were, we've seen these types of plans before from homeowners or developers, and to my knowledge, have agreed with staff and not approved them. So we're in a position here where, I personally support the mission. I want to see it succeed, but we can't it's putting us in a position to set a precedent of allowing this in this situation, but not for next month when a homeowner brings us the same or a similar plan. So I'd like to hear other people and what you have to think, but that's kind of what's going on, in our heads right now, what we're struggling with.
Understood.
I too really appreciate the mission that you have and the work that you're doing here. Unfortunately, the use of a structure is not part of our purview. It's not something that we are allowed to consider. And as Commissioner Price said, we have to look at this the same as if it was a developer coming in with, multiple housing units. It's unfortunately, in a different context, this structure might be more appropriate or with some modifications appropriate if it was a neighborhood of 2- and 3-story buildings, 2.5, 3-story buildings. Unfortunately, with it being 1- and 1.5-story buildings, it limits our ability to define what's appropriate scale and height and mass. And so along with my other commissioners, I'm struggling with trying to figure out a way that this might work in the current context. To me, it looks like a good design, really generous units for people, but that's not something that we can wave the wand and approve without some justification with the guidelines.
And to clarify a little bit more, add a little more to I would be willing to consider height difference from the immediate context within reason, but my main issue here is the house behind a house form that has been a hard stop for us in the past. So if we're talking about 2 stories versus 1.5, maybe that's a structure that steps up because of the grade change in the rear, like we just saw in Germantown and approved. When slope issues affect how you can build, the guidelines do allow for the rear to rise taller than the front portion. But the overall house behind a house form is what I'm mostly struggling with on this one.
same here. I do appreciate the, mission, and I fully support it. But I am struggling as a historical commission, designing, massing, and try to meet the guideline. So that's the biggest struggle. And I'm wondering, we do approve DADU. So when we approve DADU, we can kind of take a consideration about the setback or between main house and DADU's distance. So, with that all in mind, not like, current design, but I think there might be a way to utilize the lot, utilizing like a DADU option. So if applicant can keep working with the staff, maybe not as tall house behind the house kind of concept, but more adequate height, ridge height. But DADU approach in separation or smaller house scale, but going into rear setback and have some kind of reason where, we could accept. So I'm thinking there could be some kind of design room. So for that, I am still kind of hesitant to approve as presented today.
I have to agree with my fellow commissioners. It's always a challenge. We don't consider use when we look at these guidelines, and usually it's a good thing for us. Occasionally things come before us that we would love to be able to consider the use, but we just can't. There's so many issues between this design and the design guidelines that I'd love to see us get there, but I don't know, sitting here today, that we can work out blow by blow every single issue with this design. So that's just where I'm at.
Commissioners, anything else? Very well said. Yes, we can absolutely be compassionate to that, but we do have a purview, and so we will have to vote on that. So will somebody make a motion?
Am I allowed to ask questions? Do I have?
I have closed public hearing, but
Okay.
unless the commissioner wants to, you're asking us questions concerning a possible design? Is that what you're going to lead to?
No, I guess from a use standpoint,
We do not have purview over use, so that would not be a discussion really that might be profitable or equitable for you. I think we're hitting to architectural and design guidelines, so that's what we can speak to you, directly. But I think hearing the commissioners' voices and what their opinions are, is that working with the staff is really important. And if you have talked to the contractor needs to really go with the staff, go line by line with the designs so that it can fall in line. And we do want to see it again. And we feel that there's going to be a design that will fit there. And just have to be a little bit more step by step.
Okay.
So, with respect to this project, I really applaud the use and the intentions of the Park Center and the owner, and certainly they're to be commended for working so well with their neighbors, having the letters of support from the neighbors. But I think from this standpoint, because of the differences between the design guidelines that were approved by the neighbors and the councilman, that I hope to see this project come back for today. With respect to 808 Powers Avenue, I move for adherence to staff recommendations.
There's a motion. Is there a second? Second by Commissioner Johnson. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, that motion passes. Thank you, and we hope that you continue to work with the staff.
thank you.
Next up is 1506 Ferguson, which is a circa 1920 frame bungalow that contributes to the historic character of Belmont Hillsborough. The applicant proposes an outbuilding that is 997 square feet. The outbuilding meets all of the design guidelines except for its overall height. The proposed height is 23 feet, 3 inches tall from grade, which is more than the 18 feet, 6 inches tall house as measured from finished floor. So in Belmont Hillsborough, the design guidelines state that the height of the house can be no taller than, the height of an outbuilding can be no taller than the height of the house. And how that's been measured in the past, I'm just going to give you a little bit of background information. In comparing the height of the historic house to the height of the outbuilding, the commission has compared the two proportionally rather than by grade to ensure that an outbuilding is compatible to the primary building and applicants are reviewed consistently. So this is to ensure that when there's lots with a lot of grade like this one, that you don't have a 2-story outbuilding behind a 1-story house, or conversely, not to punish those lots where it slopes up, where the outbuilding's always going to sit taller just because of the grade. So how it's been measured in the past is that it's been measured from the top of the finished floor to the ridge, not including any additions and not including any ridge raises. However, in this case, staff does recognize that the house is only 18 feet, 6 inches tall, and that maybe doesn't allow for any type of usable upstairs space. So in situations like this, the commission in the past, when outbuildings have been less than 20 feet in overall height, or when historic houses have been less than 20 feet in overall height, the commission has allowed outbuildings to be up to 21 feet. So if a house is particularly short, just so to be reasonable and allow people to have some upstairs space, in a couple cases, the commission has allowed up to 21 feet. There's actually a case on consent where you approve something similar. So staff is recommending that instead of the 23 feet, 3 inches, that it be reduced to be no taller than 21 feet here in this case. So that is the recommendation, that staff recommends approval with the outbuilding being no taller than 21 feet to the ridge.
Thank you, Melissa.
Here.
Hi, I'm Martin Wick. I'm at 912 Bailey Street. I'm the architect for this project. I know that the guidelines kind of take, it's a little bit of a confusing section of the guidelines, but as far as this site specifically goes, as this drawing shows, because of the extreme grade change, the outbuilding will sit 14 feet below the first floor of the main house. And so by the time you're back there, it's a 10-foot, 9-inch difference between the ridge of the historic house and the ridge of the 23-foot, 3-inch outbuilding. It's a huge change in slope, and I think given also the fact there's a couple of other odd things with this site, this house actually sits unusually close to the street. It's only a 20-foot front setback. So it kind of fills up your field of view a little bit faster than some houses do. It's 160 feet deep, so a little bit deeper than normal, and it's a 66-foot wide lot. So there's going to be a side addition. The addition is not under review right now. We're going to apply for that later, but we're intending to do a side addition or a side extension on the rear addition that will basically block your view of that outbuilding by the time it's, because of how low it's sitting that far back. This house is also unusual because outside of a 2-foot thick stone foundation underneath the front wall, it actually doesn't have a foundation line the rest of the house. It's built on piers. And so the appearance of the house is just siding all the way down. And so, I think a lot of the guidelines kind of refer to measuring from like a foundation line because that's kind of how you judge the scale of the existing house. But in this case, there isn't a foundation line at that ridge to really judge it. And by the time you get to that ridge, you're 23 and a half feet tall at the house. Outside of kind of the general site information here, this is also just a good question. This comes up a lot with lots that slope like this. I know we have this conversation pretty frequently. And this section of the guidelines is kind of a mess. It's actually, I know this is still not in the consolidated guidelines, but it is something that was a huge part of what we were trying to address when we did the consolidation. I was in those stakeholder meetings and clearing up all of the italicized text in the documents was a big issue with that project. So as far as the actual guidelines governing the height of an outbuilding, the only real written piece is the outbuilding should be compatible by not contrasting greatly with surrounding historic outbuildings in terms of height, scale, roof shape, materials, texture, and details. Now, we've clearly moved away from that because we're not judging based on historic outbuildings. We have written new guidelines because this commission understands that the use of outbuildings has changed a lot over the last 10, 20 years, that most of them are getting used with space upstairs. And so additional height is allowed, additional massing is allowed because that's kind of what the use is at this point. The other thing that we did with the consolidation was really clean up how we treat outbuildings. That was a huge focus of that consolidation, and this commission and staff kind of all came to the conclusion that for almost every lot, basically everything except for a corner lot, 25 feet tall is just the limit. There is no consideration for the historic house anymore because all that limit does is punish smaller historic houses that are just trying to get kind of similar spaces to what their neighbors have. And so in the new guidelines, 25 feet tall is just the allowed height. And so this 21-foot number that is now, kind of part of the old guidelines where it's not written anywhere, it's kind of a hard target to know unless you've done this before. That number feels a little outdated at this point because the commission has chosen that 25-foot tall number in the consolidation as sort of what they see as appropriate for outbuildings moving forward. And I think in this particular case, because there's so much confusion between what's an official guideline, what's in the italicized text, which is in the guidelines referred to as an interpretation of the guidelines, being able to find something that cleans that up was a huge part of the consolidation. It was a very successful part of it. And to just not apply that to the old guidelines because they didn't, choose to do the consolidation doesn't quite seem right because it's that italicized text that isn't actually official guidelines. And so I'd like to hear the commission's thoughts on that and, how that might apply to this project. Thanks.
Thank you. Open public hearing? Sure.
So we're the house behind. So it's 1403 Cedar Lane.
Your name, please.
Rusty Miller.
Thank you.
The grade is just as steep as described and continues to go down. The bottom of the grade is in my yard. And it's not just my yard. You guys will be back in Sevier Park soon enough. It's the neighborhood. And it's 6 more houses down. So think about it as couplets, because this is probably going to be a subject that comes up again and again, because there aren't a lot of rear dwelling units to refer to in this particular area at the moment. 23 feet, 25 feet, whatever the number is, I'm looking up at it from the low point of the yard. So it's going to look a whole lot taller because it's about, I haven't measured it, but it's going to be 10, 15 feet more grandiose from my vantage point and from anyone that comes in behind me. And that's going to be true down the block as you get closer to Sevier for another 5 lots over. So I can appreciate that there's a useful amount of space, and I hear that echoed in the 21-foot number, but if it were my vote, I'd like to see that recommendation upheld. I also want to bring to the attention of the group the setback, and not because I have a specific concern, but because I've observed a house 2 lots up that did a similar project, not the same height and specs, but a project that came all the way out to the alley. And even though the setback permits that, this is not a wide alley. And the neighbors got into a battle over turning radius on parking. There's a lot of heavy equipment that goes up and down that alley, whether it's electrical with storms, There's a telephone pole in question between our yards that's going to have to get
Mr.
dealt with.
Miller, 5 seconds.
Setback's an issue if we're not taking it into consideration, and I would ask that you would.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Okay, close public hearing. Thank you. Commissioners?
I'll take the end at the beginning. We were asked to comment on being in or out, and some neighborhoods opted to be out, and this is one that opted to be out, and the rules that when you opt to be out are the rules when you opt to be out. So, opting out, you're right, or the neighborhood's right, or, whoever passes the guidelines. That's how the sausage is made, right? And I think then taking advantage as an applicant or anybody taking advantage of something or viewpoint on something that is elsewhere and not in your district is my opinion about why it might not be appropriate here. We're left with what we're left with. So that's my take on that, responding specifically to that issue.
Thank you, Commissioner.
I think this, guideline is pretty clear to me. It says that or outbuilding shall maintain a proportional mass, size, and height to ensure it is not taller or wider than principal structure on the lot. But however, there are some exception, and because Main Street's principal structure is so short, we previously approved up to 21 feet. So I think this compromise based on the guideline seems very reasonable and fair to me. So with that, I could support staff recommendation.
Thank you, Commissioner.
I appreciate Mr. Wick's summary of and involvement in the consolidation of the design guidelines and reminding us how that worked out and why it was done in the first place. And I would encourage neighborhoods that did opt out to maybe reconsider, given this situation that we're in. We're being asked to apply the new consolidated guidelines to a neighborhood who was very adamant that they did not want to have the consolidated guidelines. So those residents and representatives of Belmont Hillsborough, we're being put in a position that's not really fair. And I think that we do need to, as Commissioner Johnson said, we are allowing additional height above the height of the house itself. It is a compromise already. So I feel like the staff recommendation is right on here.
Thank you, Commissioner. There's no other comments. Please make a motion.
With respect to 1506 Ferguson Avenue, I move to approve the staff recommendation with conditions.
There's a motion. Second by Commissioner Johnson. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, that motion carries. Thank you.
Okay. Next up is 800 Fatherland. The existing structure is infill and outbuilding that the commission approved in 2011. It was actually the first staff recommendation I wrote. The applicant proposes to add a second level to the existing outbuilding and to add a stair tower and projecting balcony. Here's the site plan. The outbuilding was approved originally to be 4 feet from the side property line, which does not meet the base zoning setback of 5 feet. However, the additional footprint of the new addition won't affect the setback and won't encroach any further. So staff, although there will be a second level proposed to go on top, the side setback won't be further encroached. And so for those reasons, staff finds that the setbacks are appropriate. Just here, the site plan just want to make sure that the site plan isn't quite showing that there is a projecting balcony to the side of the new enclosed stair, which will add about another 50 square feet to the footprint. So the existing structure is 917 square feet, which meets the design guidelines because the lot is over 10,000 square feet. And the enclosed stair will add an additional 80 square feet. And with the balcony, the overall footprint is pushed up to 1,047 square feet, which is 47 square feet larger than what is typically allowed under the design guidelines. And that's just to note that in the past, the commission has typically looked at kind of any space that's like upper level, whether or not it has brackets or posts to the ground, that it is kind of as a footprint, just as a way to kind of manage the scale and overall height and scale of outbuildings. So the commission, again, has typically counted protruding upper level balconies on the footprint calculations for outbuildings. However, in 2017, MHCC adopted a policy for balconies on outbuildings. That policy states that the upper level balconies on outbuildings could be permitted and then not included in the footprint square footage allotment if they meet these criteria. One is that they are located either facing the principal house or the rear of the lot, and then they would not be permitted facing side property lines. 2, the outer facing railing meets the base zoning setbacks. That does in this case. The footprint is limited to 30 square feet or less. This one is 50 square feet. The balcony be uncovered, and the balcony does not have posts to the ground. So the proposed balcony meets some, but not all of these criteria. It meets the base zoning setbacks and does not have posts to the ground. However, it is larger than 30 square feet and it faces a side property line. And because of the deep eaves, it is partially covered. This is the house facing elevation. So the balcony faces, this is the house facing elevation. So the balcony faces South 8th Street. Staff recommends that the balcony, in order to kind of meet the commission's policy, be reduced to be no more than 30 square feet, be relocated to the house facing side or the rear, and be uncovered in order to comply with the commission's balcony policy and ensure that the footprint of the structure does not exceed what is allowed under the design guidelines. And so here's the street facing, the South 8th Street facing elevation showing the balcony. And here are just the other 2 elevations on the alley and on the interior side. So overall, staff finds that the outbuilding's height, scale, materials, setbacks, and overall design meet the design guidelines with the exception of the balcony, which pushes the footprint over 1,000 square feet. And then I won't repeat what's up on the screen, but we're recommending approval with standard conditions and with the issues regarding the balcony. And the applicant is here.
Melissa, may I ask you a question?
Sure.
I'm not familiar with this balcony policy. I don't remember it coming up before. Was it incorporated into the consolidated?
It was not. So this is Edgefield, and Edgefield was never part of the consolidated design guidelines. It was part of an approval back in 2017, so it actually didn't make its way into the design guidelines. The consolidated design guidelines, not that we're following these, they do have elements of this in the consolidated design guidelines, but Edgefield being a historic preservation overlay was never a part of it. So it was part of an approval that the commission made for another house on Fatherland. I can't remember which block it was, maybe 600 block. And that was a stipulation for that balcony that was approved.
With regard to the stipulation that it not face a side lot line, wouldn't it face a side lot no matter where it is, because it would be visible from the side lot line on either side?
Yeah, I think the idea behind that part of the policy was like, so it's not like overlooking someone's backyard, overlooking someone's side yard. So I mean, yes, you're going to have views no matter what, but it's not just right on the side yards. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. You could just advance with the.
Hello, I'm Kristen Knoll, and I'm actually the owner of the property. And she has been stuck with me again, I guess, after all these years. And this is the second time I'm doing a presentation to the commission. So I appreciate you allowing me to do this. And I did put my own presentation together for this. Back in 2010, when I purchased the property, was the downturn in the economy. And I had decided there was a vision I wanted to have for this property. And it was accomplished, mission accomplished. We had some compromises back then, and I'm going to be asking for a compromise today. Obviously, I'm here to talk about the balcony. This one right here? Okay. Oops, the other way. Okay. So there's the house, by the way, and I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with it. So just some quick facts on the house. It was constructed in 2012. Frank Lloyd Wright inspired design with the larger overhangs. First LEED certified home in East Nashville. I'm a LEED AP, so I was serving on the U.S. Green Building Council Board of Directors here, so I had to do something, or I would probably gotten kicked off the board. Received the Historical Commission Preservation Award in May 2012 from this sitting board, so it was much appreciated. And I think the current design request is intended to complement the existing home design and the unique features of this house. Obviously, this was already kind of shown, but this was the original submittal I had. So this is like the second submittal that has actually been provided to you all. But, there was some compromises already made on this. I wanted the balcony to be much bigger. And another compromise that has been made is that the DADU does not exceed the height restrictions, but it actually was higher on the eaves than 17 feet. So I'm already having to tear out the floor, the base of the garage inside, which I could use if I didn't have to go with that 17 foot, but it was 18. So I'm having to start over in there to reduce the size of the eave height. So that's one compromise that's been made, but I did want the balcony to be quite a bit bigger. So that's what it was originally, I guess, all across the back where the staircase is going to be built. So Ms. Baldock showed the one on the left is what is currently been submitted, but I really wanted it to be more like the one on the lower right-hand side, where I wanted to create some columns that look like the front of the house. So this is what faces the side of the road. It'd be complementary. It would, match what's happening on the front of the house. So I wanted this to be more columns. I mean, I guess you can call them posts if you want, but I wanted a decorative column there to match what's going on in the front of the house, which is those. This was part of the discussion early on. Obviously, they're very stately and they catch your eye, and I love them, but I want something similar but on a smaller scale on the back. Obviously we were approved for a third story, and the vision when I bought that property is I wanted a view of downtown, and I have it. It's beautiful up there, but there are columns that were constructed on top as well. So the column idea, I just kind of wanted to carry it over to what's happening on the side of the house as well. Okay, so I think she's already gone through all the things that are the recommendations. And, this is the presentation I was putting together yesterday. So I put my thoughts down, and, basically the guidelines, it was really based on past decisions, not actual design requirements in the guidelines, because as she just mentioned, there is nothing about balconies in the Edgefield guidelines. It's considered to be part of the footprint, the balcony, but here's my practical engineering side. It's on the outside. It's not part of a footprint. I looked up the definition of footprint. Footprint is actually defined by exterior walls and living space inside, not what's happening on the outside. So I kind of disagree with the 1,000 square foot limitation because of the definition of footprint. Counting the eaves over the balcony as being covered, what am I going to do? Take the eaves off? It's part of the design. So if they're covered by 3 feet, I would prefer to have the whole thing covered because it faces west. So, again, my practical side, I'm like, I really want this whole thing covered. But it will be partially covered with the eaves the way the design is. And as Thank you, David, for asking this question. So there is nowhere to put the balcony if it's going to face a side yard. I mean, if I put it in the back, it'll be like much larger in the back, but then it goes further in the backyard. It just doesn't make any sense. I don't know how it would be placed anywhere if it can't be placed on the side facing 8th Avenue or 8th Street. South 8th Street is what it is. And then I already mentioned the situation with the post idea. I would like it to be bigger than 30 square feet. I mean, yeah, I don't know if I could put a table out there, truthfully, 30 square feet. So I want to mention, and I have the permission of my neighbor for this. There is a neighbor next door that put up a huge covered deck balcony. It's right next to my property. I'm going to show you a couple pictures here in a minute. The square footage of that is actually over 1,000 square feet. It's 500 square feet right next to me. It's completely covered and screened in. It's not limited because it happens to be attached to the house, and it does have support walls, and there's a clear view to South 8th Street. So there's the back of the houses right there. There's the balcony. They're set up looking right into my backyard now. And, we're city living. There's not a lot of privacy. We know we're right next to each other. I mean, it's fine. But, this was approved, and it's the footprint of that, if you count 2 stories, is 1,000 square feet with the 2 stories, over 1,000. There's the view of it from where my balcony would be. Actually, my balcony and the staircase will cover this now. But that's the view from the sidewalk on South 8th Street. That's what I'm seeing, from my property. You can see it all the way I'm standing out in the middle of the street where I took that picture. So, I guess I'm just going after practical aesthetics, okay? There's another huge balcony right next to me that is 540 square feet each story, and I'm asking for a little bit larger than 30. So, and plus 2. I mean, the garage is big. It was approved. It's got the whole house, including the garage, have 46,000 brick on it. And when I saw the garage, I was like, that's pretty big. But, at the time, I think there were less limitations. And again, I think I may have been the only one submitting a permit for building in Edgefield that year. I mean, no one else was doing anything. So it was the bottom of the building construction market. But, now I want to use the property, it's a great asset. I mean, with the Titan Stadium and things going in, I think, having a second place for, having it available to me is going to be helpful. So, we're talking about existing historic guidelines. I went through the guidelines, and it, contributes what I have planned to the historical and architectural character of my current house. It's compatible with the style, height. It's nowhere near the height of the house and the scale with the balcony. Looking, looking at the house with the columns and the rooftop deck I have there, as we've already discussed, it meets the size requirements as far as, because it's over 10,000 square feet. And there is no specific information about balconies in the guidelines. So I kind of disagree with all these restrictions being put when there's actually not been written up in the guidelines, specifically to Edgefield. So there's my argument there. And I respectfully understand what your argument might be as well. But, I'd like to just have this considered, the balcony. I want it to be bigger than what, the current submittal is, to match more the scaling of what the current house is. It's not going to intrude on anybody's privacy. It's facing 8th Street. And that's, I don't know where else I'd put it. And it is, I think, going to be aesthetically pleasing and complement the beauty of the corner property lot. So, and I have 7 seconds left, so I finished my presentation. So I'd be happy to answer any questions. And, I'm passionate about, Edgefield, and, I just want to do something that's going to be nice for the neighborhood too. So.
Thank you. Appreciate your explanations as well. Okay. Any questions to the applicant?
I have a question, and
Sure.
this might be obvious to
Commissioner,
everybody else. But
can you move your, thank you.
I just want to clarify something. So as submitted, your balcony is actually 50 square feet, but you're asking for 80?
Well, the original was like, I think, was it like 100, I think? I don't remember now exactly, but I was like going, oh, it'd really be nice if I could do 8 by 10. Because it would basically then come to the edge of the existing staircase. It would just look better, to come across, it'd be more, complementary to what I'm already putting back there. So that's why I said would love to have it to be really 80. So it just look better because it'd be, completely across the side of the staircase that's planned.
Okay, but just to clarify, as submitted, it's at 50.
No, yeah, I think it is, yes. The original submittal was, I think, 100. It was closer to 100, but, I think, well, maybe it was 80. Well, I know what it is now. We had to change the staircase size. So the staircase meets codes barely, to keep it under the 1,000 square feet. So we're already limited there. So I did change that a little bit, but, I would obviously be happy to make sure this is tweaked appropriately so you have the final version of it before anything obviously would get started here. But I'm just more about the balcony is just too small. I would prefer to have columns there. I think it would look better, and also too it's a lot less expensive to do it that way than what's being proposed. I've talked to a structural engineer about this, and it's it's just a little bit more involved with it. So but obviously I'm asking for something a little different than maybe anybody else has, but the house is different than anybody else in the neighborhood, if I'm being honest. So there was some compromises made, Mr. Walker, which I'm not seeing him here, but unless I'm missing him, but he actually did come out and we compromised on the project. He and I did together on various things. The windows and doors are going to be matching exactly what's on the current house. So there's not going to be surprises there.
Yeah, let's just stick to the question.
Okay, I'm sorry.
I found it. It's on the drawing.
Yes,
as
thank
submitted,
you.
it's 53 square feet.
Yeah, well, but that was because I was told I had to make it smaller, but then now after thinking about it, if I'm going to come in here and do a, request, I'd like it to be bigger.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
But I guess
You
where
have
I'm
more
going
questions?
is we can't consider something. I mean, what we're tasked to do is to discuss what's submitted.
Yeah,
Correct?
That's correct.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify that.
Yes, Commissioner.
that's probably,
Yeah, thank you. Have we opened public hearing already? I'm just so engaged in this conversation. We have not yet opened a public hearing, right? Okay. I'm opening a public hearing. Close public hearing. Okay, discussion. Thank you. We might ask some more questions, but thank you.
oh,
for a
sure,
moment.
okay.
I find myself persuaded by the applicant's argument that I think this is a good project, and I agree that the eaves covering it partially shouldn't be seen as a knock on the design. I also agree that a modestly sized balcony is not technically considered part of the overall footprint or square footage of the structure. It's not conditioned, which I believe is also a consideration when you're calculating square footage, is whether or not something is a conditioned space, and this is not. The location is facing a street. It's not facing somebody's backyard. So this 2017 policy on balconies, it's a little squishy to me. Like I said, I'm not familiar with it. I don't remember dealing with it before. So I find myself persuaded that this is okay. So.
Yeah, I'll
Other
pile on
opinions.
that. I think the orientation of this balcony being towards a street, the house takes advantage of a corner. It addresses, well, albeit aside, maybe in contradiction to the 2017, it addresses the side setback, but I would say it's more appropriate. It's the most appropriate as being maybe more appropriate than the rear, and certainly more appropriate than the inside or the other side of the stair. Its location is in the right spot for, this site.
Just want to include too that, when we review projects, it's specific sites. So it's not like we're setting precedents. so we have the ability to make some leniencies when it's appropriate. This is math and scaling and context. So just want to be sure our public also knows that it does not set precedents.
And I just want to make one point that this does meet the setback. We've had issues before where balconies have projected into the setback, so they're not appropriate. Staff would recommend that they're not ever appropriate if they're not meeting the setbacks.
And I remember a case where that happened a couple of years ago. So I appreciate Ms. Knoll working with staff. I know you've already compromised on the side of the stair and columns, and so thank you for working with them on that. That said, I'm okay with where it is now.
So I have a question as well before you make your motion, if there is one, about the structuring of the poles to match the design of the building. Are you actually addressing that as well?
Actually, I've looked at that, and I found the angled support a little bit awkward, but I also found the vertical post there a little bit awkward. It appears to me, and you'd have to check with your structural engineer, but it looks to me like that balcony could be cantilevered from the existing stairwell and not have to have supports underneath, which would meet the guidelines with it not extending to the floor, and might be one solution that could be looked at with staff.
Just before you vote, just because in the past we have considered balconies as part of the footprint, and this is a change, and just all decisions can create precedents. So if there's, if you want to kind of set new parameters beyond what we was set in 2017, or if if there's other reasons why this project is different than other buildings, we would want to hear that in the decision. Just because from staff's end, when something is approved differently than what we've advised people in the past, we want to make sure that
we need to make good decision on our reasoning. So let's be sure we do that.
Yeah, Commissioner Stewart, I don't, there's not a disagreement with the assumption that it could be cantilever, but I think we should be one specific about there's an as-submitted plan. If there's any variance from that, we need to say what it is very specifically, whether it be addressing the columns or angle bracket, or it's either no bracket, cantilevered, or it's a bracket, not a column, would be my recommendation in addition to the staff's request.
Melissa's point on how we count this as square footage is well taken, so I'd appreciate anybody's thoughts on. I don't have any immediate reference of how we've done this recently, so.
And one of the reasons, just so kind of looking back at all projects, additions as well as outbuildings, we have counted things like with brackets, sometimes not with less than like with columns, because it creates like more of a covered like porch type space. So, that's kind of where the bracket recommendation came in. For instance, for houses, this is different because it's a house, but for a house that was not built with a front porch, we don't typically allow a new front porch, but we do allow like a bracketed hood, just to allow people to get in and out without getting rained on. But we always kind of, the post was kind of a tipping point to being more permanent. So that's where that recommendation came from the staff side.
I think I'm going to retract my statement about not setting precedents. I think we should be careful about not setting precedents. Let me just repeat that so I'm not on record to say, we're not setting precedents. Hopefully that's understood.
So can I ask a clarifying question then?
Yeah.
Okay, so in the past, this 53 square foot balcony as presented would be counted within the square foot requirement.
So prior to 2017, it's my understanding that, I don't want to say for every case, but that was the general policy that outbuildings, we counted kind of anything that kind of created a covered space below it, whether or not that was a balcony with posts or a balcony with brackets, as part of the footprint. In 2017, the commission adopted the policy. It was actually a project in Edgefield on the same street, different block, with the stipulations that we went through in the presentation. I do believe that and I can't remember what they are off the top of my head. This is, when we looked at the consolidated design guidelines, there were stipulations put in place to kind of limit balconies. Again, the overall thought was, someone could do like a whole, that's not what they're proposing here, but you could do a whole wraparound balcony and say it's not, part of the footprint, so having limitations on what is appropriate and what is modest is helpful to have from staff's end. Yeah.
I would maybe Commissioner Price was looking for some additional opinions. I think because this stair protrudes from the form of the structure, it lends itself more for this add-on perception of a balcony, be it a wraparound balcony, a gigantic balcony that increases the scale of an outbuilding. That the projecting stair in my mind lessens it form-wise, and it, in appearance as presented, seems modest. If you want to wiggle through the guidelines in that way, I could be persuaded by that in terms of providing some cover. I do think the column down to the ground or to grade, while wanted by the applicant, makes a difference in terms of what the appearance of a balcony is, and structurally what you can do with a balcony. Again, if this were on the back and it were a protrusion, it would read differently in my mind in terms of scale and all those things. Also, if the stair weren't sticking out, I would again think it's an add-on element, and here perhaps one way of looking at it would be that it's less so.
Can staff please tell us again how much square footage is that total?
It's about 50 square feet, somewhere between 50 and 53 square feet.
Wait a minute, it's the total.
Oh, the total, I'm sorry. Can you go back to that side?
1,047, I think is.
Yes, that sounds right.
Okay. So what is the requirement?
Of 1,000 square feet.
Right. So we're over 47 square feet.
Yes.
Okay. Just to clarify that.
And one more, the stairwell counts as part of that.
The stairwell does count, yeah, because that's fully enclosed. Yes. And just again, the commission, the design guidelines require that staircases be fully enclosed for outbuildings.
So I'm trying to get the technicality, because we do count a staircase as a part of the footprint. So that will bring to 97 square foot. And if we count balcony as a cantilever instead of, balcony, because it's kind of sitting on the staircase, so there's nothing below the balcony other than staircase. So if we count that as not adding footprint, because this is covering for the staircase. So that, I think we can still within the 1,000 allowable expansion if we take a look that way. And especially, 30 square foot balcony is stipulation, not written in concrete as a guideline, because that was in the past. So I think how we take a look at the balcony and a foundation. So we do take a look at the foundation as a staircase. So therefore, expansion footprint will be 80 square foot. So that's the way I kind of read this blueprint. So with that interpretation, I think it's barely kind of meet the guideline.
And if whoever's making the motion, let's be really clear, that's why we're making the motion.
Is there any way I could say one? No, I can't. Okay. Okay. Okay.
With that, I would invite Commissioner Johnson to make a motion.
Okay, make motion on regards to 800 Fatherland Street. We accept, let's see, staff recommendation except condition number 1, because condition number 1 as submitted will meet our interpretation of the design guideline because of the 80 square foot expansion with the footprint.
Clarity, it's shown as 50 on the plan, so I think we should be specific.
Yes.
So it is.
The balcony size as submitted.
As submitted. Okay, thanks.
As submitted.
As submitted.
Okay. There is a motion Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Commissioner Price is seconded. All in favor of the motion? Any opposed? All right, seeing none, that passes. Staff, are we good to go? Okay, I'll give you direction for further future. Thank you. All right. Thank you, applicant. I think you got what you wanted. No more comment. No more comment. Actually, let me say this because we're on record. It's because your presentation was compelling. And when you have given us those kind of reasons, this commission is discerning. So we just want to be sure because we don't want to get caught into another project that we're doing, harm to what the design guidelines say.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'll work with the staff to make sure all this is corrected or whatever I need to be doing. All right, thank you.
Hello. I think it's been a couple months since I've actually given a presentation. So, hello, everyone.
Hi, Jenny.
Nice to see you. I know everything's been on consent. All right. Next up is 120 2nd Avenue North. This is an application for a rooftop addition and storefront changes to this non-contributing building that fronts onto 2nd. They're on the right, and the rear elevation is on 1st on the left. Other way, sorry. The rear's on the right. The front is on the left. The rooftop addition will add a 4th story along 1st Avenue, which staff finds to be appropriate as the structure dates from 1994 and is non-contributing. And the 4th story height is compatible with the context along 1st Avenue. This section shows the existing slope of the roof and the proposed new construction along 1st and on the rooftop. The appropriate step backs are indicated. Sight lines have been provided showing that the rooftop addition is not visible from across either street. Staff finds that the proposed rooftop work meets the recently revised design guidelines for rooftop additions on 2nd Avenue. The applicant is also proposing to replace existing single-pane storefront windows with a combination of fixed and single-hung windows over knee walls. Staff finds that the fixed windows are appropriate, but the operable sash windows are not. There are no examples of historic sash windows on the street level on 2nd Avenue, and therefore staff finds this window type to be inappropriate here. Staff recommends that street-level windows be either fixed or casements, as casements would mimic the look of paired doors, which is what we saw there historically. Not in this building historically, because this building is not historic, but otherwise at 2nd Avenue. In conclusion, staff recommends approval of the proposed addition and storefront alterations with the conditions seen here. Questions for me? Yeah, the applicant is here and would probably like to speak.
Thank you, Jenny. Thank you, applicant, for waiting to the end here.
So there are 9 there, and I know there's 8 commissioners, and thank you, sorry. That was us not being able to read directions, is what that was. 10 instead of 12. Great, thank you. Proceed. Thank you, ma'am. My name is David Plummer. I am an architect with Centric Architecture at 1206 Buchanan Street, and we are the architect for Ryman Hospitality Properties, who's undertaking this project. Thank you, by the way, to Jenny Warren for all of her work with us in helping advise us and coach us through this. And we did end up with one thing that we're asking for some consideration on, but everything else, the dialogue was really helpful. So as the staff has noted, the only thing that we are really here to discuss is the window type at grade level on 2nd Avenue. Everything else we're very happy with. The staff's suggestion, recommendation is that those windows be either fixed or casement.
And as this is a restaurant, bar, we all know what's going on down there on Second Avenue. Being able to open the windows is pretty darn important to, the feel of the neighborhood and the commerce and everything else. Therefore, fixed isn't really something that would work for the client. We are proposing single hung because that is a form that is historic. We understand that staff has pointed out that historically at grade, it would have been more like what historically is called storefront, not what architects today call storefront, and would be fixed. We propose the single hung so that it can be opened. And we know that that form is in the context of the rest of the building. We have looked at the recommendation of casement very much in depth, and our concerns are somewhat highlighted in the attachment, which I can mention. Primarily, first and foremost, outswing casements swing out over the sidewalk. There are a lot of people there. Not only is it unattractive, but I think it's really dangerous. People are going to walk into it. It's just, we don't want to do that. In-swing casements, we've talked to multiple manufacturers, and they say that all of their in-swing casement products leak, and therefore they do not sell them for commercial applications. So that's pretty compelling. What they recommend is a product which is an in-swing casement, which is actually fabricated as a bifold. And staff has advised us that bifold is not a historic form that the guidelines support, but that's essentially what we're asking. So our first, and also I think, Jenny, you told me that we're not supposed to be able to give you a multiple choice. So I may have to rephrase how I phrased this, but we're asking for single hung to be in the context of the upper stories and as it's a historic form. If that doesn't work, we'd like for you to consider bifold in swing so that it's not a danger going out, as shown some examples in the attachment. And I'll just real quickly here in 30 seconds point to a few examples. On the first page, on the right, you can see an example of in swing bifold installation. It's just above where it says Liberty Commons, but it's actually 111 Broadway. The windows on the bottom left of the first page, those are also in-swing bifold. They look like fixed, but they're very broad. We don't want to do windows that are that broad because they would stick into the space too far. And again, we're concerned about danger. Second page, bottom right, and these are all precedents within a few blocks. Not all are in the same district, I acknowledge, but they're all precedents downtown. Image on the bottom right, again, bifold, in-swing. Third page, top right, bifold, in-swing. Those do leak, by the way, but we're going to try and work on that because it's still better than outswing. And on the last page, you can see some examples in the district. I don't know when they were built or what guidelines they were under, but the point is they're outswing. And you can see that they're both relatively unattractive, not necessarily historic, and absolutely dangerous for the people walking on the sidewalk. So that's just what I would like the commission to consider. I'll stop talking so that I can be available to respond to any questions. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
So
Go ahead, sir.
David, on these drawings that you handed out, can you point out to us the windows you would prefer and then your second choice?
I'm going to ask Laura Batson on our team to come and give the right answer, or Shaw Flippin, a representative from Ryman Hospitality Properties.
The image of Liberty Commons.
Please tell us who.
Laura Batson.
Thank you.
With Centric Architecture. We are looking for single hung is our request. The Liberty Commons example down on the bottom right is somewhat in line with that. Those are single hung windows, kind of in an overall storefront, system aesthetic. So that's what would be our first choice. And then this document is kind of outlining all of the locations around our property that have windows that are not casements and not fixed.
And then your second choice?
Second choice would be in-swing bifold.
Is it?
Is that above the Liberty Commons? I'm sorry, is that the The sample above Liberty Commons.
That is an in-swing bifold, yes. We would look for black instead of the silver color.
Okay, thank you.
And Jenny, maybe you can pipe in now, but is this new information? Are we, I'm worried that we're being asked to consider things that wasn't part of the initial submission.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Thank you for
defer to Jenny in terms of what she's reviewed.
Well, and David said, we discussed this, that they kind of needed to decide, you can't ask for multiple things. So you have to present one thing. What they presented is the single hung window. It's a little bit of a gray area if the commission wants to, I feel like in the past, the commission has had discussions about maybe what would be appropriate. So I don't know who makes that call. But what they're asking for officially in the application was a single hung sash window like you see here. Is that your preference?
Yes, that is what we're asking for. This document is kind of showing all the properties around us that don't meet what it historically was requested.
Laura.
Yes.
I've heard Lauren, but I'm getting old, so forgive me.
It's Laura.
Okay.
Laura, yes.
In terms of the single hung, this is an architectural in the specifics, and I see on Liberty Commons, there are muntins in the windows. Architecturally, you're sort of balancing things here. We're trying to meet, the old school interpretation of what storefront is, and it's kind of a clear pane, and there aren't muntins versus something that traditionally would, if you're going to make it single hung, it's got a horizontal. I'm sure you've thought about whether it's more appropriate that these not have muntins or that they do. Could you talk about how you arrived at that and pitch us on one or the other?
Well, I think that working through the aesthetic and what they're doing on the inside, as well as the property, that was part of the vision from the beginning, that they would have the muntins as part of the facade. I don't want to speak for you, Shaw, you can say, but I could be convinced either way personally, David, to have them or not have them. But with a single hung, I do think that having the muntins break it up, make that horizontal sash much less visible.
I was curious because I think, and you don't necessarily have to respond to this, but as we look at this, the base being different from the upper part is an interpretation, and then having a single hung window and having them be similar, I think it really could, I don't have a compelling argument to go necessarily one way or the other. I think the top left is a more traditional historic interpretation. I think the other doesn't offend me, and I think could be argued. The staff may be freaking out right now and saying, don't do that, but I just was trying to figure out a way to figure it out.
I just want to clarify, I should have labeled it. The top left there is existing and bottom right is proposed.
And the top left being more traditional to a historic storefront, I would argue, architecturally.
Top left is fixed because it was built years ago as a gift shop. They don't want people taking the 5-finger discount through the open windows. If Laura's right, and I don't want to undermine all the work of the team over the last 8 months, that they would prefer the muntins. Mm-hmm. But if the commission says you can't open your windows or you'd get rid of the muntins, I think we'll get rid of the muntins and have it feel more flat.
I'd be curious to other commissioners' interpretation of that in terms of whether no muntins is closer to better or historically accurate, or it doesn't matter because because they're operable, so on and so forth. And I don't know if anybody else sees that as important, but I just thought I'd bring it up.
So we have this is where, I know, back and forth, so we've just asked questions to the applicant. I've not opened public hearing yet. Are we done with questions for the applicant at the moment? Okay, good. Thank you. Just a little clarification. Open public hearing. We may do this again. Open public hearing. Close public hearing. Okay. Discussion. Thank you.
I just wanted to clarify something with staff. I used to live right across the street at 107 2nd Avenue North, and granted, it was the second floor, not the bottom floor, but we had sash windows. And so are you saying that there's no examples of sash windows?
On the ground floor. They
ground.
are actually proposing sash windows on second and third. That's fine. We routinely approve sash windows on second and third floors, but on the ground floor, no.
Is that because it's a historical precedent of, that?
Correct. Historically, there were not sash windows on the ground floor. There would have been either fixed windows, like a storefront fixed kind of window, or paired doors is what was historically on second.
Or what?
Paired doors.
Paired doors.
Like French doors, kind of.
Okay, thank you.
I always find this to be an interesting thing to look at on Broadway and Second Avenue because I remember we had a project a number of years ago where is originally, before air conditioning, building was obviously built before air conditioning had operable windows. Then Ed Keeble came in and closed in those windows when air conditioning came in. And we had an applicant that was proposing something different than either of those. And it was a difficult project. And so this one, I think, is difficult as well. I guess, Jenny, from your standpoint, which look of these two images is more appropriate to this setting?
Well, I don't think we're trying to choose between these two. The one is what's existing and the other is what they're proposing.
Right.
We found that the proposed sash windows were not appropriate because when they were open, it would create a look that was never there historically. I know you guys always look at how things operate and how they look both open and closed. So our issue was a sash window when opened is not going to look historically appropriate. There's nothing else like that on second. We didn't really have an issue as much muttons or no muttons. We were concerned about the operability. Does that answer your question?
So it sounds like it's the horizontal bar of the double hung window that's.
It's not the horizontal bar. It's that when it's open, you'll have a void that you wouldn't have had. They would have opened either this way as doors, which is why we thought the casement might be an okay kind of compromise because it would still have that sort of French door look, or it would have been just fixed.
And so a follow-up question, if you will. Some doors could be either in swinging or out swinging historically. Code-wise, now they're out swinging for good reason. And so in
Hello? Okay, the mics are back.
Okay, hello?
Okay. Presentation isn't, but we remember, right?
Yeah, so I think, yeah, the applicant wants to do what we've allowed to be done on Broadway. Second Avenue is not Broadway, but as an entertainment district, it is.
We have not allowed the sash windows on, as far as I'm aware.
Understand. I'm going to another place.
Okay.
So in terms of if sash windows are not viewed as historically compatible and accurate, even though it's a non-contributing building, then, and that was their preference, I think I would suggest that allowing the staff to review what the applicant has proposed, which would be an in-swinging, basically a biparting window that just conceals to one side. It's a really expensive casement, if you will, is that's the option for the owner to be able to have an open feel to the ground floor of, the sidewalk level of this building,
And
for what it's worth.
we're
We're trying to bring a fine point to it, I guess, if we will.
staff finds that what would be either fixed windows or casements that would somewhat mimic paired doors. Staff has considered other alternatives, and staff finds either of those two alternatives would be appropriate.
And
And that's our recommendation.
Sure.
The commission is obviously
understood.
here to consider what
I guess I was trying to bring a fine point to it so that we could as a commission say, well, it's either this or that, and this isn't appropriate. We either find that the sash windows are appropriate for some reason that hasn't yet come out in our discussion, or that we would allow the applicant to work maybe with the staff to work on a casement-ish solution that has been demonstrated and proved, and approved previously.
Ben, could you explain to me the casement window and how it works?
Yes, so it's I should let the architect. Casement window is it's a full rectangle with glass. There's no, unless you put them in there's no interruption. So it's like a plate glass window, and it has the knob on it, and you sort of turn it around in a circle. You've used one before, and it either rolls out like this, or it can roll in a residential scenario. The outswing ones, as the applicant pointed out, don't leak, and the inswing ones do. It's very difficult to construct a window like that and it just, all the details work wrong to send water into the building. But did I answer your question?
Margaritaville, how do those windows work?
That, I'm going to use a brand name, but that is like an accordion window, and it was approved, or as I recall, maybe test approved, that in its closed position, it maybe mimics an uninterrupted big plate of glass with no vertical, one could argue it has no vertical interruptions. And there are examples of large panes of glass historically after air conditioning on storefronts. And that was sort of, that was the logic behind allowing that. But that is an accordion style window that has multiple panes that kind of fold up.
Right.
I think in this case, we're looking at only one fold, not multiple folds. And that when it's open, it has the appearance of a vertical mullion in the middle.
And was that all right with Wild Horse? Was that one of the options?
I think that's the alternate that they're proposing is what, I don't want to.
Fine with me. Yeah. That sounds good to me. If that works.
I do. I have a non-architect question. Me being the non-architect is what I mean. Please don't throw tomatoes at me when I ask this question. If what is not architecturally appropriate or historically appropriate is the void, isn't there a void there no matter how you open the window?
I think the void, I had a similar sort of thought, and then as the staff answered the question, the void would be if the doors were completely open, like you might chalk the door when when the fire marshal was no such, historically there was no such, and you would open the doors because it was just really hot and a cross breeze was necessary. That was a void, and it was present. What wasn't present was the void that was throwing the sash of a window up like you would have on the ground floor of a residential.
Okay.
I hope I'm making the distinction as the staff has described it or sees it in a commercial versus residential application.
Thanks for not throwing a tomato.
I have a question to the staff. I guess mic's off. So according to this, there's many bifolding windows on the Second Avenue, so which is different from casement type. So this window will be appropriate on the Second Avenue. I'm convinced, such window is not appropriate with historical context. But how about those bifolding windows?
To the best of my knowledge, from what I was told, is that we have not approved bifold windows on Second. I know some of these examples are on Broadway where we have approved them. If there are some on Second, I don't know if maybe they were installed prior to the overlay or if they were
There's new
installed without
information presented at a hearing. We haven't had a chance to kind of go through these and look at whether or not we approved them, if they were in violation. We would have to research it because it's new information.
I think we don't have speaker issue. I mean, we got a speaker issue, so you have to talk louder.
Lighting up, but it's
Yeah.
No.
It's not happening. Doesn't work, Commissioner. They're not
were again
working.
for a minute, but now. Oh, okay. The mics are working for TV, even though they're not helping us.
Okay.
So if you can go ahead and put your
That's
mic
good.
on when
Thank
you're
you.
speaking.
Went out, everything was shut down back there, but we're
Yeah.
back.
As long as you can hear us. Okay.
Okay.
Very good. Thank you.
Okay.
Would it be appropriate if the commission, we've approved this around the corner. I'm not aware that we've done it. There appear to be some examples. Well, there's an example on First, which is in the Second Avenue District. If we were to allow the staff the ability to review this new information, and if they found that in keeping with the guidelines, the applicant wouldn't have to come back to us, they could choose to come back to us if the staff did not find it appropriate, but is that a possible outcome that legal and staff would?
I'm sorry, could you repeat? I didn't
The
follow.
staff, admittedly, this is new information. The staff has not had a chance to review it. It potentially new to the district. I think from some of the discussion that I've heard, and given that we've approved it on Broadway, I'm not looking at the side-by-side guidelines, but generally something that works on Broadway could work on Second, could, maybe a stretch. If as a commission, we felt like that were an option and allow the staff to then go back and review it, and if at the staff level they approved it, then the project moves along. If the staff made an argument against and said it wasn't appropriate, the applicant could certainly come back to us and have us review it as commissioners, and we would weigh it just as we would any other thing. I'm trying to shorten the distance of it not being 90 days from now when the applicant has to come back and see us as a possibility. Maybe that's the best thing to do, but I was just asking the question.
Right. Our policy has been what we look at as what our purview, and the recommendation is this. We either approve it or disapprove it, or the applicant can defer it. Listening to our conversation, which they brought in new information that the staff has not been able to review, that happens. So that's the option. And if we do, I'm throwing stuff out, but if you disapprove it, then they will have the chance to review this with staff.
Understood. Then they must come back to us.
That's
I thought I heard we were thinking of this and then we were thinking of that. Our preference is this, and the staff we have to make an application of a thing, not two things or five things.
right.
So that this is not something they've considered before, I don't find that as what I understand to be the facts here. So I'm providing a little bit of quarter. It doesn't mean we have to accept it, and we can deny it as presented and move on.
Right.
But I'm positing that for consideration of the commission, and just only that.
Duly noted, Commissioner, and there might be somebody else. Again, what I hear from staff is that this has not been approved in the past for Second Avenue. That is a given. It's a fact. So I think when our commission will listen to staff recommendation to say that's not been approved before, again, let's consider that. But again, look at what they have recommended. We either approve it or disapprove it. I think they've heard the conversation and discussion about what other options are, and the applicant can go back and discuss this with the staff.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. So bifold windows weren't really even in front of us at this point.
No,
Right.
that is new information.
Right. So really, we're only trying to decide about what's been proposed, and that's the
Number one.
Right.
That's our question here is number one.
Right.
And again, I hear staff saying we've not approved that in the past. So, Commission, you hear that?
So I think cleanest thing for us to do today is accept staff recommendation, but also direct staff to further research bifold windows, how we were approved or not approved, and on that presented document. And so just confirm of the availability or acceptability of the bifold as a research and come back to us.
I agree.
And to give a little more context, I remember probably Broadway, some other commercial historic districts, we've made a distinction between infill, non-historic, non-contributing buildings and leeway with window types versus historic buildings with historic storefronts, where we would not potentially allow a new window type to be considered. And so I think that's something to be considered here too.
Yes. Thank you.
I like your idea of a way forward here.
Yep. I agree with that. So let's go with that. Absolutely.
Do they not have the right to defer it?
They do. And I'm throwing it out there, but I can't make that. We can't make that decision of deferral.
Well, we should give them the option.
Is the timeline different between a deferral and a?
Oh, there is?
I don't know.
30 days to the next meeting, I believe. Isn't that legal?
Would that be more expedient, is what I'm asking then?
The deferral would be to the next meeting.
It can actually be to any meeting that you want it to go to, but yeah, you could defer it to the next meeting.
The applicant would need to be the one to defer, correct?
Yes, correct.
They have, this is just a very small piece of this project, and their preference would be,
Make the decision today.
if you're leaning towards approving this project, subject to the windows being worked out, they would prefer to keep the project moving while we work out the windows,
Gotcha.
rather than deferring the whole thing
Right.
until next month.
Okay, I see the nod
Yes.
from the applicants. I think that is the discussion that we've been having now. So I think let's move forward with that. So, Commissioner.
So with respect to 122nd Avenue North, I move for approval of the project, including the staff recommendations, with the further charge that the commission agrees that the single double hung window is not acceptable, and charge the applicant to come back and work with the staff on other options.
That is very good motion.
Second.
There's a second by Commissioner Cotton. All in favor of the motion? Any opposed? Seeing none, that motion carries. Thank you. Thank you to the applicant. It's all right. This is all learning experience for us as well.
Thank you for your, thanks for your contribution to the neighborhood.
Yes, thank you.
Appreciate it.
Okay, next up is 411 North 15th Street. This is an application for a rear addition that steps wider than the historic house. You have received public comment from a neighbor. This project was removed from the consent agenda. This is a modest one-story addition to a contributing 1.5-story house in Lockland Springs East End. Staff found that the proposed design met the guidelines in terms of height, location, mass and scale, setbacks, and rhythm and proportion of openings. The public comment questions the use of screen, among other things, but this is a commonly approved material in our overlays, both administratively and by the commission. Staff finds that the proposed materials are appropriate. The design proposes a rear addition that steps wider than the historic house, which the guidelines allow in certain instances. Staff found that although a wider addition does not strictly meet the guidelines, perhaps it could be appropriate in this case for several reasons. The guidelines state that a wider rear addition can be appropriate if the house is narrower than 30 feet. The house has a width right at 30 feet. Given the modest nature of the addition, staff found that perhaps an addition that would be appropriate for a house just slightly narrower might also be appropriate here. The wider portion is only 2 feet 6 inches wider. It's only 1 story, and it is an open screened porch. Additionally, this wider portion is 57 feet back from the front wall of the house, limiting its visibility. The addition meets the base zoning setbacks. While every case is unique, the commission has approved similar cases in the recent past where an open screened porch steps a few feet wider in the rear. In conclusion, staff recommends approval of the proposed addition with standard conditions as seen here. The applicant is here and would like to speak. Yeah.
Thank you, Jenny.
Questions for me? No.
Thank you for waiting.
It was interesting.
We're always learning.
Hi, I'm Jay Catalano. I've been the owner of 411 North 15th Street with my wife Lily for the past 15 years, and I'm happy to tell you about the proposed addition we're planning. Developing historically appropriate and accurate plans has been the driving force during this process, and this project will be filled with period details and historic materials I've accumulated over the last 10 plus years, including flooring, doors, hardware, windows, and cabinetry. Various ideas for plans were discussed, many possibilities were discarded, and we ultimately reached a proposal that we feel complements the character and the historic integrity of the original house and the neighborhood and fits with our family's needs. One goal of the current plan is to preserve as much of the yard beyond the addition as possible. With our kids constantly playing soccer and baseball back there, we felt it was important to keep that backyard space available for them and their friends. Configuring the proposed porch with a slight extension to the side preserves enough green space for playing back there. From the street, the porch will have almost zero visibility. Where the porch would extend beyond the side of the house by about 2.5 feet is about 100 feet from the street, and it sits well behind a 6-foot tall fence on that side of the house, which is, you can sort of see there. And there's also an 8-foot tall hedge that runs from the street all the way back to where the porch would be. So based on the fence, the distance from the street, and the hedge, again, the porch would have almost no visibility. So I'm happy to answer any questions, and thank you for all your time.
Thank you. Any questions to the applicant?
In considering I feel, it's obvious in looking at your proposed project that it's a modest addition compared to some of the other things that we see, and that, screened-in porches are certainly not an anomaly in historically, or I don't know every house in this neighborhood, but certainly a screened-in porch is common. Did you consider other options, or are there things in the backyard that would cause you to have this particular orientation or of the porch, or concerns to do it some other way would be a question to ask.
Yes, thank you for the question. Yes, we did consider other options, and some of those led to the footprint being deeper into the yard, and we felt this was the right balance. By going over a couple feet, it would also allow the porch not to have like a more functionality, better proportions instead of like a long kind of bowling alley type feel. So it seemed like that extra few feet would really improve the overall flow of things. And that's how we ended up with this proposal.
So if you like sort of maybe went out to the existing bay, it would extend into the yard further and be a larger footprint, I guess, measured front to back is stating the obvious here, but yeah.
Yes.
Okay, thanks. That's all for me.
Okay. Open public hearing. Close public hearing.
I just wanted to mention that this was pulled from consent because we did get some written public comments and those were forwarded on to you.
Thank you, Melissa. Open, close, discussion, motion.
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate in the questioning that I had for the applicant, but also that a narrower, I agree with the staff's analysis on this project. I don't find that the wider single-story addition is contrasting greatly in form. I think that it's a screened-in porch. It's not a solid form. It is roofed, but it's not a solid form. Is less impactful or contributes to the fact that it's less impactful to the historic house, and that its distance from the street then further adds to that, and its distance and visibility, albeit visible, is appropriate and meets my interpretation of the guidelines in terms of scale, materiality, roof form, all of those things.
Yes, thank you for outlining that. Okay.
Yeah, I think the public comment was if this meet the guideline, because it is in a way exception, because it generally the addition should not be wider. That was the commenter's question, but actually in this particular proposal, it meets the guideline because the lot size is just at 30 feet wide or narrow, so that is entitled for the wider addition. Considering, as applicant stated, they consider other option, but came up with this slightly wider option is more viable and meets the guideline. So therefore, I'm comfortable recommending because it's meet the guideline.
Thank you, Commissioner.
I agree with my fellow commissioners, and I feel I should disclose I'm a personal friend of the Catalanos, but I don't feel that will cloud my judgment or my opinion that the staff recommendation is correct.
Thank you, Commissioner Price. Okay. Ready for the motion?
In regards to 411 North 15th Street, I move that we accept staff recommendations.
Motion? Second. Second by Commissioner Mayhaw. All in favor? Okay. Any opposed? Seeing none, that motion passes. Okay. Thank you so much, applicant. Thank you for waiting. Okay.
All right, thank you.
I think that is all. Ms. Baldock, is that all we have? All right. So we are good to adjourn. So, yes.
See you next time.
Thank you. Thank you, IT.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information on this and other programs, visit nashville.gov.